For days after my 10-year-old daughter, Lily, won the biggest award of her young life, my mother-in-law destroyed it. Not with her own hands. With a smile. 4 days earlier, Lily had been standing on the stage of the Charlotte Regional Arts Center holding a certificate almost as big as she was. When they announced her name as the winner of the Regional Youth Fine Art Scholarship, the entire auditorium stood and applauded. She looked out into the crowd with tears in her eyes. Then she searched for me. The second our eyes met, she smiled. That smile reminded me so much of her father that it almost knocked the air out of my lungs. Marcus would have been crying harder than I was. He always believed Lily had a gift. He used to tell her, "Talent isn't something you're born with. It's something you protect." At the time, neither of us knew how right he was, or how soon someone would try to take it away. My name is Lauren Vance. I'm 38 years old. I'm a widow. And this is the story of how my mother-in-law's jealousy toward a 10-year-old child uncovered a financial secret that destroyed everything she'd spent years building. But before I tell you how that happened, I need to take you to the family dinner where it all began. If stories about family betrayal, justice, and unexpected karma are your kind of stories, take a moment to subscribe. I post new stories every week. Now, let's begin. The celebration dinner was Beatrice's idea. That alone should have warned me something wasn't right. My mother-in-law had never celebrated anyone unless she somehow became the center of attention herself. When Lily won the scholarship, every relative started calling. Every family group chat filled with congratulations. People I hadn't heard from in years suddenly remembered my phone number. Everyone wanted to tell Lily how proud they were. Everyone, except Beatrice. She simply sent one message. Congratulations. Nothing more. No heart emoji. No excitement. No phone call. Just one cold word.
2 days later she called me.
I've reserved the private room at Belamonte. Belamonte was one of the nicest Italian restaurants in Charlotte. White tablecloths. Crystal glasses. Piano music. The kind of place where people celebrated promotions, anniversaries, and milestone birthdays. I thought the family should celebrate Lily properly. Something about her voice bothered me. It sounded forced. Still, I ignored the feeling. Maybe grief had made me suspicious. Maybe I was reading too much into it. After Marcus died 2 years earlier, I questioned everyone's intentions. Losing your husband changes the way you see people. You start noticing who disappears, who shows up, and who quietly hopes you'll fail. Marcus and I had built a simple life together. He owned a custom cabinet workshop. Not a giant company. Not a chain. Just a respected local business built with his own hands. Every cabinet, every staircase, every dining table, he treated with like an artist treated paint. When Lily was little, she'd sit beside him wearing tiny safety goggles while he explained different types of maple and walnut. By 8 years old, she wasn't interested in woodworking anymore. She preferred charcoal pencils, watercolors, pastels, sketchbooks. Marcus loved that. She's building things too, he'd say. She just builds them on paper. When he passed away after a sudden illness, our world stopped. For months, Lily barely drew anything. Then one Saturday, I found her sitting at the kitchen table with an old photograph of Marcus. She had spent 6 straight hours drawing his face. Every wrinkle, every laugh line, every strand of hair looked
alive.
I stared at it for nearly 5 minutes before realizing she was watching me. "Do you like it?" I couldn't answer. I simply hugged her. That drawing still hangs in my studio today. After Marcus died, I couldn't bear walking into his empty workshop every morning. So I took the small savings we'd built together and opened a pottery and design studio downtown. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't making me rich, but it paid the bills. It gave Lily a safe place after school. And for the first time in months, we both started smiling again. Beatrice hated it. She never actually said she hated it. She simply called it my little hobby. Every chance she got. "When are you going to get a real job? Clay doesn't pay retirement. You've always been too artistic to understand the real world." She worked as an office administrator at an elite private school. To her, success meant business suits. executive titles, corner offices. She couldn't understand why anyone would willingly spend their day covered in clay. Amanda was exactly like her mother. My sister-in-law had spent years climbing the corporate ladder in marketing. Every family dinner somehow became another opportunity for Amanda to explain how important her latest project was. Until suddenly, she quit. She announced she'd become a full-time lifestyle influencer. Beatrice treated it like Amanda had been elected president. She's building a brand.
She's her own CEO.
The future is digital. Meanwhile, when people complimented my pottery, Beatrice would smile politely, then change the subject. There was another child in the family, Amanda's daughter,
Emily.
She was the same age as Lily. When they were younger, they used to play together. But as they grew older, everything became a competition. Whose grades were higher? Who played piano better? Who won school awards? None of it came from the girls. It came from Amanda. She compared them constantly. Even birthdays became contests. So when Lily won the regional scholarship, I knew Amanda wouldn't be happy. I just never imagined how far she'd go. Bellomonte was packed that Friday night. The hostess escorted us into a private dining room near the back of the restaurant. Long mahogany table, fresh flowers, soft candlelight. Almost 20 relatives had already arrived. Everyone applauded when Lily walked in. She blushed immediately. She hated being the center of attention. Her scholarship certificate rested carefully inside a leather portfolio she'd carried everywhere since the ceremony. Next to it, her favorite sketchbooks. The same ones she'd been filling for nearly 3 years. They contained hundreds of drawings,
Portraits.
landscapes, ideas, dreams. Her entire artistic childhood. She never let them out of her sight. I noticed Amanda staring at them. She smiled, but it never reached her eyes. Dinner began pleasantly enough. People asked Lily about the scholarship. They asked about her favorite artists, her plans, her dreams. For the first time since Marcus died, I watched my daughter laugh without forcing it. Across the table, Beatrice watched silently, swirling the wine in her glass, observing, waiting. Then she finally spoke. "You know, it's wonderful, Lily won." She smiled. But children should be careful. The room grew quiet. Too much praise at a young age can make them arrogant. Amanda nodded immediately. I've seen that happen. Lily looked down at her plate. I reached under the table and squeezed her hand. It's okay. About 20 minutes later, Lily stood. I'm going to wash my hands. She grabbed nothing. Not her sketchbooks. Not her portfolio. She smiled at me. I'll be right back. I watched her disappear through the dining room doors. I had no idea that those few steps would divide our lives into a before and an after. 15 minutes. That was all it took for my instincts to tell me something was wrong. Lily was 10 years old enough to use a public restroom by herself, young enough that she never wandered off without telling me, especially not in an unfamiliar restaurant. At first, I tried to stay calm. Maybe there was a line. Maybe she'd bumped into another little girl. Maybe she'd gotten distracted admiring the paintings that lined the hallway leading to the restrooms. I looked toward the hallway again. Still nothing. I glanced at my phone. No messages. No missed calls. No sign of Lily. Across the table, everyone continued eating. The conversation had shifted to Amanda's latest social media campaign. She was enthusiastically explaining how difficult it was to manage a personal brand. I wasn't listening anymore. I checked the hallway a second time. Still empty. I pushed my chair back. I'm just going to check on Lily. Before I could take 2 steps, the double doors opened. At first, I saw Beatrice. She walked in slowly, smoothing the front of her navy dress as if she'd simply returned from freshening up her makeup. Her expression was perfectly calm, almost satisfied. Right behind her came Amanda. She was adjusting the sleeve of her designer blazer while whispering something to her daughter, Emily. Emily looked uncomfortable. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't speaking. She kept staring at the floor. Then, I saw Lily. For one terrifying second, I didn't even recognize my own child. Her shoulders were shaking so violently she could barely walk. Her cheeks were streaked with tears. Gray-black ink covered the front of her cream-colored sweater. It dripped down her jeans. Her small hands were stained dark. But that wasn't what broke me. She was clutching her backpack against her chest. The zipper hung open.
Inside.
Every one of her pastel sketchbooks was soaked in thick black permanent ink. The pages had fused together into one ruined block. Ink dripped steadily onto the restaurant floor. My heart stopped. Lily. I rushed toward her. She collapsed into my arms before I even reached her. Her body trembled so hard I thought she might faint. I didn't. She couldn't finish the sentence. She buried her face against my shoulder. I wrapped both arms around her. It's okay. I'm here. It's okay. Even as I said the words, I knew they weren't true. Nothing about this was okay. I looked at Beatrice. What happened? She calmly adjusted the napkin on her lap before answering. Oh, honestly, Lauren, it was just an unfortunate little accident. Amanda sighed dramatically. There was an open bottle of permanent ink sitting on the restroom vanity. Lily bumped into it. It spilled everywhere. She shrugged. Kids are clumsy. Lily shook her head violently against my shoulder. No. I knelt beside her. Lily,
Tell me.
she looked terrified. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. There wasn't any bottle. Amanda immediately interrupted. Oh, sweetheart, it's okay. You don't have to be embarrassed. Beatrice smiled. Everyone has accidents. Then she reached for her wine glass. As casually as someone commenting on the weather, she said, Perhaps it's for the best. The room fell silent. She took a slow sip before continuing. Winning one little scholarship has brought Lily far too much attention. Children need humility. Amanda laughed softly. I've been saying the same thing. She's been acting like some little celebrity all week. Then Amanda looked directly at my daughter. Now maybe you won't be so obsessed with that silly art prize. I stared at her. For a moment, I honestly couldn't process what I'd just heard. You think this is funny? Amanda rolled her eyes. Oh, Lauren, don't be dramatic. They're just sketchbooks. You can buy new ones. Lily clutched the ruined bag tighter. They weren't just sketchbooks. She whispered it, so quietly most people probably didn't hear. I did, because I knew what lived inside them. 3 years. 3 years of drawings. The first picture she'd drawn after losing Marcus. Every charcoal portrait she'd made of her father. Every practice sketch. Every competition piece. Every idea she'd ever loved enough to keep.
Gone. Destroyed.
One of my husband's older cousins finally cleared his throat. I'm sure nobody meant for this to happen. Amanda nodded quickly. Exactly. It was an accident. Another aunt gave an awkward smile. Children are resilient. They'll move on.
Move on?
I looked around the table. No one was angry. No one demanded an explanation. No one asked why Beatrice and Amanda had both been in the women's restroom with a 10-year-old child. No one questioned why Beatrice looked completely relaxed while my daughter was shaking so hard she could barely breathe. Instead, people lowered their eyes. Some continued eating. Others quietly cut their chicken as if nothing unusual had happened. That hurt almost as much as what had happened to Lily. Silence. Sometimes silence is louder than cruelty. I looked down at Lily again. Honey, did someone hurt you? She hesitated. Then tears spilled down her face all over again. She stopped herself. Her eyes darted toward Beatrice. Then toward Amanda. She looked frightened. Really frightened. That told me everything. I didn't ask another question. Not there. Not in front of 20 people pretending they hadn't just witnessed a child being humiliated. I slowly stood. Picked up Lily's backpack. The ink soaked through my sleeve immediately. I gathered the scholarship certificate before anyone else could touch it. Then I took Lily's hand. Beatrice frowned. Lauren, where are you going? I looked directly at her. I'm taking my daughter home. She sighed dramatically. You are seriously overreacting. Amanda laughed. You always make everything into some huge emotional production. I didn't answer. Not one word. I wasn't interested in arguing. Not tonight. Some battles are won by speaking. Others by walking away. As Lily and I crossed the restaurant, I heard Beatrice's voice one last time behind me. If she keeps raising that girl to be this sensitive, the real world is going to eat her alive. I kept walking. Outside, the cool evening air hit us both. Lily climbed into the passenger seat without saying a word. She held the ruined sketchbooks in her lap the entire drive home. Neither of us spoke. The only sound inside the car was her quiet crying. I reached over at one red light and squeezed her hand. "I'm so sorry." She finally looked at me. "Mom, my pictures." I couldn't answer, because I knew some of those drawings could never be replaced. When we finally pulled into our driveway, I carried the backpack inside and gently laid it on the kitchen table. Black ink pooled beneath it. Lily stared at it silently. Then she asked a question that broke my heart. "Do you think Daddy would be disappointed that I couldn't protect them?" I knelt in front of her immediately.
No.
"He would be proud of you." "For what?" "For loving your art enough to cry when someone tried to destroy it." She hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. Upstairs, after nearly an hour, she finally fell asleep. I sat alone in the kitchen. The ruined sketchbooks still lay on the table. I was staring at them when my phone buzzed. A text message from Amanda's husband,
Greg.
It read, "Lauren, Amanda lied about what happened tonight. I just found something in our financial records. Please call me as soon as you see this." For several seconds, I simply stared at my phone.
Greg?
Out of everyone in Marcus's family, Greg was the last person I expected to hear from. He and Amanda had been married for nearly 12 years, and while we were never especially close, he'd always been polite, quiet, the kind of man who listened more than he talked. Unlike Amanda, Greg never competed with anyone. He worked long shifts as a regional purchasing manager for a construction supply company, came home exhausted most evenings, and genuinely seemed happiest grilling burgers in the backyard with his kids. If he was texting me at almost 10 o'clock at night, something had happened. I read the message again. "Lauren, Amanda lied about what happened tonight. I just found something in our financial records. Please call me as soon as you see this." A second message appeared before I could respond. "Please don't tell Amanda we spoke." A chill ran through me. I quietly walked onto the back porch, so I wouldn't wake Lily. The spring air was cool. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. Everything around me felt strangely normal, but my hands were shaking as I pressed call. Greg answered before the first ring had finished. "Lauren?" His voice sounded different.
Small.
Unsteady, like someone who hadn't stopped pacing for hours. "I just got your messages." There was silence. Then he took a slow breath. "I'm so sorry." I closed my eyes. For what? For all of it. The restaurant. Lily. Amanda. My mother-in-law. I had no idea. His voice cracked on the last sentence. I leaned against the porch railing. "What are you talking about?" I wasn't at the restaurant until almost the end. My shift ran late. I only got Amanda's version. "What version?" He laughed bitterly. "That Lily accidentally spilled ink all over herself." I looked through the kitchen window toward the ruined sketchbooks still lying on the table. "That isn't what happened." "I know."
How?
Another long silence. I asked Emily, Amanda's daughter, Lily's cousin. "What did she say?" Greg sighed heavily. "She wouldn't even look at me. She just kept crying. When I finally convinced her everything would be okay, she told me Grandma and Mom took Lily into the restroom." Every muscle in my body tightened. "What?" Greg continued quietly. "Emily said Amanda locked the restroom door." I couldn't breathe. "And then?" He swallowed. "She said Grandma held Lily's backpack." My heart pounded against my ribs. Amanda opened the sketchbooks and poured the ink. I felt my knees weaken. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. I couldn't think. The image kept replaying inside my head. Lily, standing there, terrified, watching 3 years of her artwork disappear beneath black ink. Not by accident. On purpose. Greg's voice pulled me back. "I'm so sorry. I should have known. I should have seen what Amanda has been becoming." I rubbed my forehead. "Does Emily know why they did it?" She said Amanda kept telling Lily, Maybe now people will stop pretending you're so special. My stomach turned. Greg continued. Emily tried to stop them. What? She cried. She asked them not to, but Amanda told her to stay quiet. I closed my eyes. Poor Emily. She was only 10. She'd been trapped between her mother and her conscience. I don't know how to apologize enough, Greg whispered. You don't have to apologize for what they did. I do. Because I married one of them. His voice was filled with genuine shame. I've been making excuses for Amanda for years. I kept telling myself she was just competitive, just stressed, just ambitious. I don't think I know who she is anymore. Neither did I. Neither of us spoke for nearly a minute. Finally, I asked, "What did you mean about financial records?" His breathing changed, as if he'd almost forgotten why he'd called. Right. That's actually why I texted. I frowned. I don't understand. I got home tonight after the dinner. Amanda was acting strange, more nervous than I've ever seen her. I asked her what happened. She repeated the ink accident story. But something felt off. What do you mean? She kept checking her phone. Every 30 seconds. Like she was waiting for terrible news. Greg paused again. So, after she went upstairs to shower, I started looking. Looking for what? I honestly don't know. I just had this feeling. He gave a tired laugh. You know how sometimes your gut starts putting pieces together before your brain does? I nodded even though he couldn't see me. I know. I checked our household budget first. Nothing unusual. Then I logged into our joint banking portal. And that's when everything stopped making sense. Greg had always handled their family finances. Not because Amanda couldn't, because she didn't want to. She preferred talking about vision boards, brand partnerships, content calendars, things Greg barely understood. I found 3 credit cards I'd never seen before. 3? They weren't listed on our shared accounts. Completely separate. Hidden. They were tucked inside a document envelope in Amanda's office. I frowned. How much? Greg laughed once. It wasn't amusement. It sounded like disbelief. I thought maybe 5,000. Maybe 10.
He stopped.
It's over $42,000. I straightened immediately.
What?
42,000. Mostly advertising agencies. Follower growth services. Photography packages. Luxury clothing. Rental furniture. I frowned. Rental furniture? For social media photos. He sounded embarrassed even saying the words. Apparently half the expensive rooms she posts online don't actually belong to us. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You've never noticed? I travel for work. I leave before sunrise. I get home after dark. I trusted my wife. His voice became quieter. I didn't think I needed to audit my own marriage. I thought that would be the end of it. Hidden debt. Painful. Humiliating. But survivable. Then Greg said something that made everything else seem small. Lauren. There were transfers. What kind of transfers? Large ones. From Beatrice. My heart skipped. How large? 4 separate deposits. Just over $14,000 total. Into Amanda's account. I frowned. Your mother gave her money? That's what I thought. But the account numbers didn't make sense. What do you mean? The money didn't come from her checking account. It came from an account labeled HSA Administration. I froze. Health Savings Administration. Beatrice managed employee administrative records at the private academy where she'd worked for almost 20 years. Greg continued. I don't understand those accounts. But something about the routing codes looked official. I printed everything. I think. He hesitated. I think the money belongs to someone else. A cold feeling settled in my chest. Marcus had once helped oversee financial development projects connected to that same school. Years ago, he'd shown me some of the administrative systems they used. The initials Greg had just mentioned sounded painfully familiar. I slowly looked toward the kitchen, toward the laptop Marcus had once used, toward the secure business credentials I'd never bothered deleting after his death. For the first time all evening, the ink on Lily's sketchbooks wasn't the only thing on my mind anymore. Something much bigger was beginning to emerge. And somehow, my mother-in-law had just left fingerprints all over it. For a long moment after I ended the call with Greg, I just stood there on the back porch. The night had grown quiet. The porch light cast a soft yellow glow across the wooden steps Marcus had built with his own hands only a few summers before he died. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking inside the house through the open kitchen window. Normally, that sound comforted me. Tonight, it felt like a countdown. Greg's final words echoed in my head. I think the money belongs to someone else. I walked back inside, locking the back door behind me. Lily was asleep upstairs. I paused halfway up the staircase and listened. Silence. She hadn't cried herself awake again. Thank goodness. The ruined sketchbooks were still sitting on the kitchen table exactly where I'd left them. Black ink had soaked through the canvas bag and stained the oak surface beneath it. For a second, I almost reached over to clean it. Instead, I walked past them. Marcus's old office was at the end of a hallway. I hadn't changed much since he passed away. His drafting table still stood against the far wall. The shelves still held binders labeled in his neat handwriting. A faded photograph of him holding Lily on his shoulders rested beside the computer monitor. I smiled despite myself. You always kept backups, I whispered. Marcus had believed in documenting everything. Invoices, receipts, contracts, passwords. He used to laugh whenever I teased him about it. One day, he'd say, "You'll thank me for being obsessive." Tonight, I finally did. After Marcus passed away, several organizations had asked if I wanted his digital credentials removed from their systems. Most of them had been, but not all. There were a handful of oversight accounts connected to nonprofit boards and development committees that remained active because they required multiple trustees before access could be transferred. Marcus had been one of those trustees. After months of paperwork, the permissions had simply stayed. I rarely thought about them. Until tonight. I sat down in his old office chair. The leather creaked beneath me, the same way it always had. I opened the laptop. It took almost a full minute to start. The familiar wallpaper appeared. A picture of Lily, missing both front teeth, proudly holding the first birdhouse she and Marcus had built together. My throat tightened. You'd know exactly what to do, I murmured. Then I opened the secure business portal. The login page appeared. I typed Marcus's old trustee credentials from memory. The system accepted them immediately. One verification code later, the dashboard opened. I hadn't seen it in nearly 2 years. Rows of financial reports, committee records, restricted accounts, oversight notifications. Most of it meant very little to me now. Then I remembered something Marcus had once explained over dinner. Any unusual movement inside protected employee funds automatically leaves a routing history. At the time, I'd barely listened. Accounting had never interested me.
Now,
those words suddenly mattered. I clicked on administrative trust accounts. Nothing unusual. Then employee benefit funds. Still nothing. Finally, I found the Health Savings Administration ledger. My heart beat a little faster. There were 4 recent transactions. Each one had already been flagged by the system with a yellow review marker. I clicked the first entry. The withdrawal amount matched exactly what Greg had described. The second did too. Then the third. Then the fourth. Every dollar. Every transfer. Exactly the same. I stared at the screen. The money had originated from the employee medical reimbursement pool. Not Beatrice's personal account. Not a family savings account. Not a retirement fund. It belonged to the school's employees. Teachers. Custodians. Administrative staff. People who trusted that fund to help cover unexpected medical expenses. My stomach turned. I clicked another tab. Transaction authorization. Each withdrawal required 2 pieces of information. An approval code. And a reason. The approval code belonged to Beatrice. The listed reasons made my jaw tighten. Emergency prescription coverage. Critical medical reimbursement. Family health exception. Every explanation sounded legitimate. Until I opened the attached documentation. Nothing. No receipts. No medical claims. No supporting paperwork. The files were empty. Someone had approved the withdrawals. without uploading the required documentation. That alone should have triggered an internal review. Why hadn't it? Then I noticed something else. The review dates. Every single transaction had been postponed. Again.
And again.
And again. The next scheduled audit was still months away. Amanda's words from the restaurant suddenly came back to me. The auditors won't look until the fall. My blood ran cold. She hadn't been guessing. She'd known. I leaned back slowly. This wasn't simply a mother helping her daughter. This was a deliberate misuse of employee funds. If the transfers Greg had found were accurate, then Beatrice hadn't just embarrassed Lily. She'd spent months quietly moving money that didn't belong to her. I closed my eyes. Marcus, did you suspect something? A memory surfaced almost immediately. About 8 months before he became ill, Marcus had come home unusually quiet. I'd asked if something was wrong. He'd shrugged. Just paperwork. Later that night he'd said something I'd completely forgotten until now. Sometimes people think nobody notices little numbers. But little numbers become very big problems. At the time, I'd assumed he was talking about construction estimates. Now I wasn't so sure. I opened the audit history. Several automatic warning notices had already been generated. Each one marked pending oversight review. No one had opened them. No one. Because Marcus had been one of the designated reviewers. After his death, his notification queue had simply remained untouched. The system had continued collecting warning flags, waiting for someone to finally look. A strange feeling washed over me. It was almost as if Marcus had left one last unfinished job behind, without ever knowing it. I picked up my phone and texted Greg. I found the transfers. 3 dots appeared almost instantly. So I'm not crazy?
No.
A few seconds later, another message arrived.
There's more.
Amanda's deleting files from her laptop. She doesn't know I made copies first. I stared at the screen. Deleting files?
Why?
Then another message appeared. Lauren, I think they're trying to cover this up tonight. Before I could reply, a new notification appeared in my email. Automated audit alert. Priority review required. Someone else, Sir, had just triggered the same financial warning. And for the first time that night, I realized this wasn't going to stay inside the family. By morning, people far beyond our dinner table were going to know exactly what Beatrice had done. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lily standing in that restaurant hallway, clutching her ruined sketchbooks. Then, my mind shifted to the financial records, the missing documentation, the employee medical fund, Amanda's panic, Beatrice's calm expression. It all fit together too neatly. Around 2:30 in the morning, I checked on Lily one last time. She was asleep, curled around the small stuffed rabbit Marcus had given her when she was 5. Even in her sleep, tear stains were still visible on her cheeks. I gently brushed a strand of hair away from her face. I'm going to fix this, I whispered. I don't know how yet, but I promise I will. At 6:30 the next morning, I was already awake. Coffee sat untouched beside my laptop. The financial portal remained open on the dining room table. I had spent nearly an hour printing every transaction history, authorization log, and audit notice I could legally access through Marcus's old trustee credentials. I wasn't planning to accuse anyone. Not yet. I simply wasn't going to let those records disappear. Greg had texted me shortly after sunrise. Amanda hasn't slept. She keeps making phone calls. 5 minutes later, another message appeared. My mother-in-law came over before 7. They're talking in whispers.
Then,
nothing. I assumed he'd put his phone away. Or maybe Amanda had walked into the room. Either way, I knew something was happening. I just didn't know how quickly it was coming toward me. At exactly 7:48 a.m., my doorbell rang.
Once. Twice.
Then a third time. Not politely.
Demandingly.
The kind of ringing that says the person outside believes they're entitled to your immediate attention. I walked over to the security monitor mounted beside the kitchen. 3 people stood on my front porch. Beatrice, Amanda, and Greg. But something was different. Greg wasn't standing beside his wife. He stood 3 steps behind both women with his hands shoved into his jacket pockets. His shoulders were slumped. He wouldn't even look at them. Amanda held a thick manila folder against her chest. Beatrice looked angry. Not worried. Not embarrassed.
Angry.
I took a slow breath before unlocking the door. The moment it opened, Amanda stepped forward.
Lauren.
Her voice was too cheerful. Far too cheerful for someone who had destroyed a little girl's artwork less than 12 hours earlier. We need to clear up a misunderstanding. I said nothing. She held the folder toward me. I brought something for you to sign. I looked down. The first page already had Amanda's signature at the bottom. The title read, Mutual Statement of Misunderstanding. I looked back up. What is this? Amanda forced a nervous smile. It just explains that the restaurant incident was an accident. She spoke unusually fast. No one intentionally damaged Lily's belongings. There were no inappropriate comments. No emotional harm was intended. It protects everyone involved. I raised one eyebrow. Everyone. She nodded quickly. Exactly. You sign. I sign. And we all move on. Beatrice finally spoke. It's the mature thing to do. I looked from one woman to the other. Not one of them had apologized. Not once. Not for Lily. Not for lying. Not for anything. Instead, they wanted paperwork.
Why?
I folded my arms. Why are you here before 8 o'clock in the morning? Amanda glanced nervously toward her mother, then back at me. I received an email. What kind of email? She hesitated. From Carolina Crown Productions. The National Children's Art Company. Interesting. They said someone anonymously reported last night's incident. She swallowed. They're reviewing our family's conduct. Our family's conduct. She nodded. They said, depending on the findings, they could remove Emily from consideration. There it was. Not concern for Lily. Concern for themselves. Concern for Emily's opportunity. Concern for Amanda's reputation. Nothing else. I looked directly at her. So this document protects your daughter. Amanda immediately shook her head. It protects everyone. No. It protects you. Before Amanda could answer, another voice echoed through the hallway. Lauren. I turned. Arthur. Marcus's father. He had been staying in our guest room for nearly a week while undergoing routine cardiac testing at the regional medical center. At 73, he moved slower than he used to, but there was still something commanding about him. He had built a successful construction supply company decades before selling his shares. People naturally listened when Arthur spoke. He stepped into the foyer, wearing a light gray sweater. His eyes moved slowly across the three people standing on my porch. First Amanda, then Greg, finally,
his wife,
Beatrice. For just a fraction of a second, I saw genuine fear cross her face. Arthur frowned. What is everyone doing here? Nobody answered immediately. Amanda tried first. We're just clearing up a little misunderstanding.
Arthur looked at me.
Lauren? I shook my head.
No.
His expression hardened. I didn't ask you. He looked directly at Beatrice. What happened? She forced a laugh. It's nothing. Children had a little accident at dinner. Arthur's eyes narrowed. Lily. I nodded quietly. Her sketchbooks were destroyed. Arthur looked confused. Destroyed how? Amanda quickly answered. There was an ink spill. Greg finally spoke.
No.
Every head turned toward him. His voice was calm, but completely different from the night before. It wasn't an accident. Amanda's eyes widened. Greg. He ignored her. It was intentional. The silence that followed felt almost physical. Beatrice stared at him in disbelief. Amanda's face drained of color. Arthur looked from one person to another. Then slowly, he stepped aside and opened the front door wider. Everyone. His voice carried the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Inside. No one argued. A few minutes later, we all sat around my dining room table. The ruined sketchbooks were still lying exactly where I'd left them the night before. Arthur noticed them immediately. He reached out carefully and touched one of the hardened pages. His fingers came away black with dried ink. He looked toward Lily's drawings, now permanently fused together.
His jaw tightened.
He didn't say a word. Greg quietly reached into the leather briefcase he'd carried inside. Without looking at Amanda, he removed a thick stack of printed financial statements, credit card reports, transfer confirmations, bank routing records. He placed them carefully on the table. Then he looked directly at his wife. His voice was almost a whisper. "Amanda, explain the $42,000. The room fell completely silent. Amanda stopped breathing. Then Greg slid another sheet forward. "And after that, explain the $14,500 transferred from the employee medical fund." I watched Beatrice's face lose every trace of color. For the first time since this nightmare had begun, she looked genuinely afraid. No one spoke. Not immediately. The only sound in the room was the steady ticking of the kitchen clock. Greg's words still hung in the air. "Explain the $42,000. Explain the $14,500 transferred from the employee medical fund." Amanda stared at the paperwork spread across my dining room table. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Beside her, Beatrice slowly reached for the stack of papers. Greg stopped her.
No.
His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "I've already made copies." Beatrice's hand froze halfway across the table. Arthur looked from the financial statements to his wife, then back to Greg. "What exactly am I looking at?" Greg slid the first page toward him. "Hidden credit card balances." Arthur adjusted his reading glasses. He scanned the statements one after another. Advertising agencies, luxury clothing boutiques, photography studios, travel expenses, designer handbag purchases, high-end furniture rentals. The total sat at the bottom of the final page. $42,318.74. Arthur looked up slowly. "Amanda." She forced a weak smile. "I can explain." "I hope so." "It's not what it looks like." Greg gave a tired laugh. "I've heard that sentence 3 times since midnight." Amanda folded her hands together. "I was investing." Arthur frowned. "Investing? In my brand?" She leaned forward, suddenly sounding much more confident. "You don't understand how social media works. I had to spend money to make money. Professional photography, content production, advertising, brand positioning." She pointed toward the statements. "Those aren't shopping trips. They're business expenses." Greg calmly answered. "Then why were they hidden?" Amanda blinked. You opened 3 credit cards without telling me. You mailed the statements to a private mailbox. You transferred balances between them every month. So I'll ask again.
Why?
Amanda looked toward Beatrice, almost instinctively, like a child looking for someone to rescue her. Beatrice immediately stepped in. "Greg, you're embarrassing your wife."
No.
He replied quietly. "She embarrassed herself." Arthur turned another page. "What about these transfers?" He tapped the highlighted deposits. $3,600. $4,200. $2,900. $3,800. They came from your mother. Amanda answered too quickly. "She loaned me the money." Arthur looked toward Beatrice. "You loaned Amanda nearly $15,000? Beatrice nodded. "Yes." Arthur frowned. "From where?" "My savings." Greg reached over and slid another document across the table.
No.
They didn't. Arthur looked down. The routing numbers had already been highlighted. Employee Health Savings Administration. Internal Reimbursement Account. Restricted Funds. Arthur read the heading twice. His expression changed immediately. He looked directly at Beatrice. "Why would your savings account have these routing numbers?" Beatrice's face remained perfectly still. "I don't know." Greg answered for her. "Because they aren't her savings." For several long seconds, no one moved. Arthur slowly removed his glasses. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. Then he looked directly at his wife. "I've known you for 46 years. I've trusted you for 46 years. So, I'm only going to ask once." His voice became incredibly calm. "Did you move money that didn't belong to you?" Beatrice didn't answer. Instead, she straightened her shoulders. "I borrowed it." The room went silent. Arthur blinked. What? I borrowed it. It wasn't stealing. I had every intention of putting it back. Greg looked stunned. You've been taking money from employee medical accounts? It was temporary, she snapped. The audit wasn't scheduled until the fall. I knew exactly when I'd replace it. Arthur stared at her. You knew? She immediately realized what she'd admitted. But it was too late. Greg quietly closed his eyes. Amanda looked ready to cry. Arthur leaned back slowly. I don't recognize either of you. Amanda reached for his hand. Dad. He pulled it away.
No.
You don't get to call me Dad while I'm learning you've been lying to everyone. She burst into tears. You don't understand. I was drowning. My sponsorships disappeared. My income collapsed. I kept thinking one more campaign would fix everything. One more collaboration. One more viral video. It never happened. Greg looked at her. So, instead of telling me, you borrowed money that wasn't yours? Amanda looked at the floor. I asked Mom for help. Beatrice spoke again. My daughter wasn't going to lose everything. So you risked other families' medical funds? Arthur's voice rose for the first time. What if someone needed that money? There was enough. Beatrice answered immediately. No one was actually denied anything. Greg shook his head. That's not the point. I hadn't said a single word. Not yet. I was still watching, listening, trying to understand how people could convince themselves they were the victims while sitting in the middle of evidence proving otherwise. Then Beatrice looked at me. This is your fault. Everyone turned. I honestly thought I'd misheard her. What? If you hadn't made such a spectacle over Lily, none of this would have happened. I stared at her in disbelief. My daughter lost 3 years of artwork. It was paper. She replied coldly. Children get over these things. Something inside me finally snapped.
No.
I stood slowly. It wasn't paper. It was every drawing she made after Marcus died. The room became perfectly still. I picked up one of the ruined sketchbooks. Black flakes of dried ink fell onto the table. You remember that first year after he passed away? I looked directly at Beatrice. She barely spoke. She barely smiled. The only place she could still find her father was inside these pages. I gently opened the sketchbook. The pages refused to separate. Entire portraits had fused together forever. Lily wasn't crying because she lost paper. She was crying because someone destroyed the memories she'd been using to survive. For the first time, Beatrice looked away. Just then, soft footsteps echoed from the staircase. Every head turned. Lily stood halfway down the stairs. She was still wearing her pajamas, her rabbit tucked beneath one arm. She hadn't heard everything, but she'd heard enough. Her eyes settled on the ruined sketchbooks, then on Beatrice. Very quietly, she asked, Grandma, why don't you like my pictures? The question landed harder than any accusation. Beatrice opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Lily wasn't angry. She wasn't yelling. She simply looked confused, like a little girl trying to understand why someone she loved had wanted to hurt her. No one in the room could answer, not even Beatrice. Arthur slowly stood, walked across the room, and wrapped Lily in his arms. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. His voice cracked. So very sorry. As Lily buried her face against his sweater, Arthur looked over her shoulder at his wife. The disappointment in his eyes was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Then Greg's phone rang. He looked down at the screen. His face immediately went pale. He answered. Hello. He listened for only a few seconds, then whispered, Yes, she's here. Another pause. I understand. He slowly lowered the phone. Everyone was staring at him. Greg looked directly at Beatrice. The school's chief financial officer just called. He swallowed hard. They've started an emergency audit, and they want you in their office. Within the hour. No one moved. Greg still held the phone in his hand. His knuckles had turned white. Arthur was standing beside Lily, one arm protectively around her shoulders. Beatrice hadn't blinked in what felt like an entire minute. Finally, Arthur broke the silence. What did they say? Greg looked down at the screen before locking it. The chief financial officer called personally. They've opened an emergency review. He looked directly at Beatrice. They want you at the academy by 9. Amanda's voice cracked. An emergency review? Greg nodded. They've frozen access to every Health Savings Administration account until they know exactly what happened. Beatrice forced a laugh. They're overreacting. No one answered. She looked around the room. Honestly, this is just routine. They'll ask a few questions. I'll explain everything. Arthur's eyes narrowed. You admitted taking money. I admitted borrowing it. She corrected sharply. I wasn't stealing. It was always going back. Greg quietly replied, You don't get to decide whether that's the difference. Amanda suddenly stood. This doesn't have to become public. She looked directly at me. Lauren, if you'll just tell them Lily doesn't want to file a complaint. I stared at her. My 10-year-old daughter isn't the reason your mother's being audited. Amanda ignored me. We'll pay for new art supplies. I'll buy every sketchbook she needs. I'll even hire a private art tutor. Lily looked up from Arthur's side. Very softly she asked, Can they bring my drawings back? Amanda froze. The room became painfully quiet. Lily wasn't trying to make anyone feel guilty. She genuinely wanted to know. Amanda opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Lily lowered her eyes again. I didn't think so. Arthur gently squeezed her shoulder. Beatrice looked at the clock. I need to leave. Greg stepped in front of the front door. No. She frowned. What are you doing? You aren't walking into that office pretending nothing happened. I never said I was. You've been pretending for months. Her face hardened. You don't speak to me like that. I do now. Greg had always been the quiet one. The peacemaker. The man who avoided conflict. Not anymore. I defended Amanda every time someone said she was becoming selfish. I defended you every holiday when people said you played favorites. I defended this family. His voice shook with emotion. And while I was defending all of you, you were hiding debt. He looked at Amanda. Lying to me. Then back at Beatrice. And taking money that belonged to people counting on it for medical care. Neither woman said a word. Arthur slowly walked over to the dining table. He picked up one of the printed bank statements. When did this start? Greg answered. The oldest transfer I found was 11 months ago. Arthur looked at his wife. 11 months? She nodded reluctantly. It started small. How small? $2,000. And after no one noticed? She looked away. It became easier. Arthur closed his eyes. So, every time nobody questioned you, you convinced yourself it was acceptable. Beatrice remained silent. Greg spoke again. I checked the transaction history. There were 4 transfers. But there were also 2 canceled requests. Arthur frowned. Canceled? Greg nodded. They were entered into the system, then reversed before the money moved. Arthur looked toward Beatrice. Were you testing the system?
She didn't answer. She didn't need to.
The silence told us everything. Just then, Lily quietly tugged on my sleeve. Mom, I knelt beside her. What is it, sweetheart? She whispered so only I could hear. Can I go upstairs? I smiled gently. Of course. She hesitated, then looked at Arthur. Grandpa, can you come see something? Arthur immediately nodded. I'd love to. The two of them slowly walked upstairs together. For a brief moment, the tension inside the house eased. Until Amanda spoke again. I'll pay everything back. Everyone looked at her. I still have investment accounts. I can sell them. Greg folded his arms. You told me those accounts were empty. Amanda blinked. They mostly are. Then what are you selling? My jewelry. My camera's equipment. My designer bags. I'll figure it out. Greg gave a sad smile. It isn't about the money anymore. She stared at him. What does that mean? It means I don't know who I've been married to. Amanda's face crumpled. Greg.
No.
You lied to me every single day. You looked me in the eye while opening secret credit cards. You smiled while your mother moved money into your account. And last night, his voice became quieter. You helped bully a 10-year-old little girl because you couldn't stand seeing her succeed. Amanda started crying again. It wasn't supposed to go that far. I looked at her. What wasn't? The ink. It was only supposed to scare her. The room froze. She immediately covered her mouth. She'd said too much. I spoke carefully. What do you mean, scare her? Amanda shook her head. Greg stared at her. You planned this. She looked toward the floor. Mom said Lily needed to be humbled. Every word landed like a hammer. We were just going to tell her she'd become too full of herself. But when she wouldn't stop talking about the scholarship, Amanda's breathing became uneven. Mom grabbed the backpack. I felt sick. Amanda whispered. I thought she was only hiding it. She looked up at me, with tears streaming down her face. I swear. I didn't know she was going to pour the ink until she'd already opened the first sketchbook. Beatrice turned toward her in disbelief. Amanda. Stop talking. Amanda ignored her. I should have stopped her. I didn't. I'm sorry. It was the first apology anyone had offered. Too late. But real. Footsteps echoed from upstairs. Arthur returned alone. He looked older than he had an hour earlier. He walked directly to Beatrice. For 46 years, she'd been his partner, the mother of his children, the woman he defended through every disagreement. Now he simply asked, "Do you know what Lily showed me?" Beatrice didn't answer. Arthur reached into his sweater pocket. He unfolded a small piece of paper. It was worn around the edges, folded dozens of times. I found this tucked inside one of the sketchbooks that wasn't completely ruined. He carefully smoothed it flat on the table. It was one of Lily's drawings. A simple pencil sketch of Marcus sitting on a park bench. Underneath, written in a child's careful handwriting, were the words, "I draw Daddy because I'm scared I'll forget his face." Arthur's hands trembled. He looked at Beatrice. That's what you destroyed. For the first time, Beatrice's composure cracked. Her eyes filled with tears. But before she could speak, a black SUV pulled into my driveway. Then another. Greg looked out the front window. His face went pale. There are 3 of them. Arthur stepped beside him. All 3 vehicles had the Academy's logo on the doors. And as suited officials climbed out carrying briefcases, one of them was accompanied by a uniformed police officer. For a moment, no one inside the house spoke. We all watched through the front window as the 3 black SUVs came to a stop. The Academy's logo was printed on each driver's side door. One after another, for professionally dressed men and women stepped onto my driveway carrying leather portfolios. Behind them walked a uniformed Charlotte police officer. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't reaching for handcuffs. He simply accompanied the group with the calm professionalism of someone there to keep the peace if emotions got out of control. Amanda grabbed her mother's arm. Mom. Her voice was barely audible. I don't think this is routine anymore. Beatrice didn't answer. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely uncertain. The doorbell rang. Once. No one moved. It rang again. Arthur looked toward me. This is your house. I nodded, then slowly walked to the front door. When I opened it, the woman standing in front introduced herself immediately. Good morning. I'm Denise Holloway, Chief Financial Officer for Charlotte Academy. She held up her identification. Beside her stood another woman carrying a tablet computer, a man with several thick folders tucked under one arm, and the police officer. Ms. Holloway spoke calmly. We're looking for Beatrice Collins. Nobody answered. Then Beatrice stepped into view behind me. I'm Beatrice. The CFO gave a polite nod. Mrs. Collins, we'd like to speak with you regarding several financial irregularities involving employee medical reimbursement accounts. Beatrice forced a smile. I think there's been a misunderstanding. We certainly hope so. The CFO replied. That's exactly what we're here to determine. Arthur stepped forward. Would you like to come inside? The investigators accepted. Within moments, everyone was seated around my dining room table. The atmosphere couldn't have been more different than the night before. Instead of family members celebrating over Italian food, there were investigators opening folders, tablets lighting up, documents being organized into neat stacks. The police officer remained near the front hallway. He didn't interrupt.
He simply observed.
Ms. Holloway folded her hands. Mrs. Collins, we'll begin with a straightforward question. Did you authorize 4 transfers from the Employee Medical Reimbursement Fund over the last 11 months? Beatrice answered without hesitation. Yes. Amanda's head snapped toward her. Apparently, even she hadn't expected such a direct admission. Ms. Holloway nodded. Were those transfers permitted under Academy policy? Beatrice hesitated. They were temporary. That wasn't my question.
No.
She finally admitted. They weren't. The investigator beside Ms. Holloway typed something into her tablet. No emotion. Just facts. The CFO continued. Where did those funds go? Beatrice looked toward Amanda. My daughter needed financial help. Amanda immediately burst into tears. I'm sorry. I never wanted this. Ms. Holloway remained composed. So the money was transferred into your daughter's personal account? Beatrice quietly answered. Yes. Were the transfers disclosed to anyone?
No.
Were repayment agreements documented?
No.
Were approvals obtained from the Oversight Committee? Beatrice swallowed.
No.
The room became incredibly quiet. Even a police officer lowered his eyes toward his notebook. Arthur slowly sat back in his chair. His expression wasn't angry anymore. It was heartbreak. Greg reached into his briefcase. I think these belong with your investigation. He slid a second stack of papers across the table. Ms. Holloway reviewed them carefully. What are these? Copies from Amanda's hidden credit cards. He looked toward his wife. They show where the money actually went. The investigator began sorting through the statements. Luxury hotels, designer boutiques, furniture rental companies, photography studios, advertising invoices, social media promotion agencies. Every receipt painted the same picture. Not emergency expenses. Not survival. Image. Appearance. Status. Ms. Holloway stopped on one particular invoice. $4,800? Amanda quietly nodded. It was a branding retreat. Greg closed his eyes. You told me it was a business conference your employer paid for. Amanda couldn't meet his eyes. The investigators continued reviewing documents for nearly 20 minutes. Nobody interrupted. Nobody argued. Eventually, Ms. Holloway closed the final folder. There appears to be no evidence that employee medical claims were denied because of these withdrawals. Beatrice immediately looked relieved. I told you. But, the CFO continued, that does not eliminate the unauthorized use of restricted funds. Beatrice's shoulders dropped again. The Academy has a legal obligation to investigate every unauthorized transaction involving employee benefit accounts. She looked directly at Beatrice. That investigation officially begins today. Arthur finally spoke. I have a question. The CFO nodded. When did you first discover this? Ms. Holloway answered honestly. Our internal software generated several review alerts over the past year. She opened another file. Unfortunately, the Oversight Committee lost one of its trustees after Mr. Marcus Vance passed away. She looked toward me. My condolences. I quietly thanked her. She continued. Those alerts remained pending longer than they should have. Arthur lowered his head. Marcus. Even after his death, his name was still somehow connected to protecting people. The investigator beside Ms. Holloway spoke for the first time. Mrs. Collins, we also need your work laptop. Beatrice blinked. My laptop? Yes. And your office access badge. Amanda looked panicked. Do you have to do that today? The investigator nodded. Immediately. We're required to preserve all electronic records. Greg slowly exhaled. He already knew what that meant. Deleting files, editing spreadsheets, changing timestamps. That opportunity was gone. Just then, Lily quietly came downstairs again. She stopped when she saw the strangers. I smiled gently. It's okay, sweetheart. Ms. Holloway immediately softened her voice. You must be Lily. Lily nodded shyly. The CFO glanced toward the ruined sketchbooks still sitting on the table. I heard you won an art scholarship. A tiny smile appeared on Lily's face. Yes. Congratulations. Thank you. The woman hesitated, then asked softly, May I see one of your drawings? Lily looked toward the ruined sketchbooks. Her smile disappeared. They're gone. The room fell silent again. Arthur closed his eyes. Greg looked away. Even one of the investigators swallowed hard. Ms. Holloway looked at the hardened pages covered in black ink. She didn't ask another question. She already understood. The CFO stood. Mrs. Collins, you'll be placed on immediate administrative leave while the investigation proceeds. Beatrice's face drained of color. Administrative leave? Effective immediately. And your building access has been suspended. Amanda grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself. Beatrice whispered, "This can't be happening." Nobody answered, because it already was. As the investigators gathered their files, the police officer finally stepped forward. His voice remained calm and respectful. "Mrs. Collins, you are not under arrest, but I'd advise you not to discuss the details of this investigation with current Academy employees until you've spoken with legal counsel." Beatrice nodded numbly. The confidence she'd carried for years had completely disappeared. The investigators walked toward the front door. Just before leaving, Miss Holloway turned back toward me. "Mrs. Vance, there is one more thing." She opened a thin folder she had kept separate from the others. "We recovered several security camera recordings from Belamonte restaurant this morning." My heart skipped. The hallway, the restroom entrance, the place where everything had begun. Ms. Holloway looked directly at Beatrice. "The footage doesn't show what happened inside the restroom." She paused. "But it does show who went in and who came out." Beatrice closed her eyes, because she knew exactly what those cameras had captured. The front door closed behind the investigators. For several seconds, no one inside my house moved. It felt as though all the air had been pulled from the room. Beatrice remained standing exactly where she'd been. Her purse hung loosely from one hand. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically. Emotionally. The certainty she'd carried into my house that morning was gone. Arthur finally broke the silence. "They have video?" Beatrice nodded almost imperceptibly. "They said so." Arthur's voice remained calm. "What does it show?" She swallowed. "I don't know." Greg answered before she could say anything else. "You know." She shot him a sharp look. "It only shows the hallway." Greg folded his arms. "And that's enough." The Belamonte restaurant had cameras throughout the lobby and hallways. I remembered seeing them the night of the dinner. Elegant black domes mounted discreetly in the ceiling. At the time, I'd never given them a second thought. Now, those cameras mattered. Not because they captured what happened inside the restroom, but because they captured everything around it. Who walked in, who walked out, how long they stayed, who carried what, who didn't. Sometimes, the truth isn't hidden inside a room. It's revealed by everything that happens before and after. Amanda sat down heavily in one of the dining room chairs. She looked exhausted. "I can't do this anymore." Nobody responded. She looked at Greg. "I've been lying for so long. I don't even remember what the truth sounds like." Greg's face softened for just a moment. Not with forgiveness. With sadness. "When we got married, you used to laugh at coupons because you said happiness didn't cost money." Amanda lowered her head. "I know. You used to make birthday cakes yourself because you said homemade tasted better." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I know. So, when did expensive handbags become more important than sleeping at night?" Amanda buried her face in her hands. "I don't know. I really don't." Arthur slowly walked over to the living room window. For years, he had defended Beatrice. Whenever family members complained she played favorites, he insisted they misunderstood her. Whenever someone said Amanda had become arrogant, he blamed social media. Whenever Marcus quietly expressed concerns about the growing tension between Amanda and Lily, Arthur always believed things would improve. Now, he looked like a man replaying decades of memories through a completely different lens. Without turning around, he asked quietly, "How long has this competition been going on?" Nobody answered. So he asked again. "Between Amanda and Lauren." I sighed. "Long before Lily was born." Arthur turned slowly. "What do you mean?" I looked down at the ruined sketchbooks. then back at him. When Marcus and I got engaged, Amanda announced 2 weeks later that she was getting married. Arthur frowned slightly. I remember. When Marcus opened his cabinet shop, Amanda suddenly started talking about opening her own business. When we bought our first home, she upgraded hers. When Lily won the spelling bee in 3rd grade, Emily was immediately enrolled in 3 tutoring programs. Arthur stared at me. You never told me. I smiled sadly. What would have been the point? He didn't answer, because he knew. I'd spent years trying to keep peace. For Marcus. For Lily. For family gatherings. I'd simply stopped mentioning it. Greg quietly spoke. It got worse after Marcus died. Everyone looked at him. I didn't realize it then, but Amanda became obsessed with comparing everything. He rubbed his forehead. If Lauren's pottery studio got featured in the local paper, Amanda needed a magazine interview. If Lily sold a painting at the community art fair, Amanda suddenly needed another luxury vacation to photograph. He laughed bitterly. I thought she was just chasing success. I didn't realize she was chasing someone else's life. Amanda didn't deny it. She couldn't. Just then, Greg's phone buzzed again. He looked at the screen. It's Denise, the chief financial officer. He answered on speaker. Greg speaking. Mr. Collins. Ms. Holloway's voice remained calm and professional. We've completed our initial review of the restaurant footage. No one in the room breathed. There is no audio. She continued. And the restroom itself is not visible. My stomach tightened. Then she said something that made every person in the room look toward Beatrice. The recording clearly shows Lily entering the restroom carrying her backpack. A pause. Approximately 30 seconds later, Mrs. Collins and Amanda entered together. Amanda closed her eyes. Ms. Holloway continued. Neither woman is carrying anything. Another pause. 8 minutes later, the door opens. Lily exits first. She is crying. She is no longer carrying her backpack. I felt my heart pounding. The backpack is being carried by Mrs. Collins. No one spoke. The video then shows Mrs. Collins handing the backpack to Amanda in the hallway. Amanda began crying again. The 2 women appear to speak briefly before Amanda returns the backpack to Lily. Another pause. All 3 then walk back toward the private dining room. Greg quietly asked, So, the accident story? Ms. Holloway answered without hesitation. The footage is inconsistent with the explanation that Lily accidentally spilled ink while alone. The call ended. Silence. Complete silence. Arthur slowly turned toward his wife. He looked at her for a long time. Then, he asked the simplest question anyone had asked all day.
Why? Not.
Why the money?
Not.
Why the lies? Just.
Why?
Beatrice's shoulders slumped. For the first time, she didn't sound angry. She sounded tired. So many people kept talking about Lily. Nobody interrupted. The scholarship. The newspaper article. The award ceremony. The phone calls. The praise. She looked toward me. Every conversation became about her. I stared at her in disbelief. She was 10. I know. Her voice cracked. I know. She wiped at her eyes. I kept watching everyone celebrate. And all I could think was, no one talks about Amanda anymore. Amanda looked horrified. Mom, I thought people were forgetting you. Beatrice whispered. I wanted them to remember how special you were. Amanda shook her head violently. You tried to destroy a little girl's memories. For me? Beatrice finally broke. Tears streamed down her face. I thought if Lily stopped shining, people would look back at you. The room fell silent again. Greg stared at the woman he'd called family for more than a decade. Arthur slowly sat down. He looked exhausted. Older than I'd ever seen him. You didn't protect our daughter, he said quietly. You destroyed our family. At that exact moment, another car pulled into the driveway. Not an academy vehicle. Not a police car. A white delivery van. The driver walked to the porch carrying a long rectangular package. He rang the bell. Confused, I opened the door. Delivery for Lily Vance. I didn't order anything. The driver smiled. It was prepaid this morning. No sender listed. I signed for it and carried the package inside. Lily carefully opened the box. Inside were 20 brand new professional sketchbooks, a complete artist's pencil set, watercolors, pastels, brushes, everything an artist could need. Tucked inside was a single handwritten card. Lily unfolded it carefully.
It read,
"No one can destroy your talent. Keep drawing. A friend." Lily smiled for the first time since the restaurant, but as I watched her hold that note, I couldn't stop wondering one thing.
Who had sent it?
For a long moment, no one said anything. Lily held the handwritten note in both hands, as though it were something fragile. She read it again, then one more time. "No one can destroy your talent. Keep drawing. A friend." She looked up at me. "Mom, who sent this?" I smiled. "I honestly don't know." And that was the truth. There was no return address, no company logo, no receipt, just a plain white box filled with beautiful art supplies. Arthur looked inside. His eyes softened. They picked good materials. Lily carefully ran her fingers across one of the unopened sketchbooks. Unlike the others, these pages were blank, waiting. For the first time since the restaurant, they didn't make her cry. They gave her hope. The next several weeks passed more quietly than I expected, at least inside our home. Outside, nothing stayed quiet for long. Word spread through the academy faster than anyone could have imagined. Not gossip.
Facts.
Employees learned that an internal audit had uncovered unauthorized transfers from the medical reimbursement fund. Parents began asking questions. Teachers wanted reassurance that their benefit accounts had been protected. The Academy's board issued a brief public statement confirming that an investigation was underway and that employee funds had been restored while the review continued. They released very few details. They didn't need to. Everyone already knew something serious had happened. Greg moved into a small furnished apartment across town. Not because he hated Amanda, because he no longer trusted her. When he came by to visit Lily a few weeks later, he looked exhausted. "I filed for legal separation." He said it quietly, almost apologetically. "I never thought I'd be the kind of man who did something like that." I nodded. "I know." He stared down at his coffee. I kept asking myself one question. What question? If Amanda had simply come to me, would I have helped? He laughed sadly. "Of course I would have. We could have sold the camera equipment, the designer bags, the extra car. We would have figured it out." He looked out the window. "But she never gave me the chance." That was the real tragedy. The lies had stolen choices from everyone around her. Amanda called me several times. I didn't answer immediately. Not because I wanted revenge, because I wasn't ready. About a month later, I finally agreed to meet her. Not at my house, not at hers. At a quiet coffee shop halfway across town. She looked completely different. No expensive designer clothes. No flawless makeup. No carefully staged social media smile. Just a tired woman carrying the weight of her own decisions. The first thing she said was, "I deleted my accounts." What accounts? My social media. All of it. I blinked. My followers. My partnerships. My videos. My sponsorships. Gone. I studied her face. Why? She looked down into her coffee. Because I realized I stopped living my life years ago. I was performing it. She smiled sadly. And somewhere along the way, I forgot the difference. For the first time, I believed she was telling the truth. Not because she cried. Not because she apologized. Because she stopped making excuses. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know saying it doesn't fix anything." "It doesn't," I answered honestly. She nodded. "I know." Then she slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a cashier's check. Enough to replace every piece of art equipment Lily had lost. I gently pushed it back. "I can't accept this." "You have to."
No.
"The money isn't what she lost." Amanda closed her eyes. "I know. I just didn't know what else to do." I stood to leave. Before I walked away, I turned back. "If you really want to make things right, start telling the truth. Even when it costs you." She nodded. I will. Whether she did or not, only time could answer. Arthur made his own decision. One Sunday afternoon, he came to my pottery studio carrying a small folder. I've changed my will. I looked up from the pottery wheel. What? He handed me the folder. I'm not asking you to read it. I just wanted you to know. He took a deep breath. I've created an education trust for Lily. My eyes widened. Arthur. He raised a hand. Marcus would have done it. I can't replace her father. I can't erase what happened. But I can make sure no one ever stands between that little girl and her future again. I hugged him. For the first time in years, I think both of us felt Marcus standing beside us. As for Beatrice, the Academy's investigation lasted nearly 3 months. When it ended, she was dismissed from her position. The final findings concluded that she had authorized unauthorized transfers from restricted employee funds and violated multiple internal financial policies. The Academy confirmed that the money had been recovered before any employee permanently lost benefits, but her employment ended, and the matter was referred to the appropriate authorities for any additional legal review. She never returned to the Academy. She sold her house the following year and moved to a small town several hours away to live near her sister. We didn't celebrate. There was nothing joyful about watching an entire life collapse. Choices have consequences. Sometimes those consequences arrive quietly. Sometimes they arrive all at once. Nearly 6 months after the restaurant, Lily entered another regional art competition. This time, she carried one of the new sketchbooks. The very first page contained a pencil portrait. Not of Marcus. Not of me. Not of anyone in our family. It showed a tiny seed pushing through cracked concrete. Above it she'd written one sentence. Beautiful things grow after hard seasons. When the judges announced first place, she looked toward the audience. Our eyes met again. She smiled. The same smile she'd given me months earlier. Only this time, there wasn't fear behind it. Only confidence. After the ceremony, a woman approached us. She introduced herself as Denise Holloway, the Academy's chief financial officer. She smiled at Lily. I've been hoping to see your artwork again. Lily shyly handed her the sketchbook. Ms. Holloway studied it for a long moment. Then she looked at Lily. I have a confession. Lily tilted her head. I was the friend. Lily looked confused. The art supplies. The note. I sent them. Lily's eyes filled with tears. You did. Denise nodded. I've worked around numbers my whole career. But after seeing what happened to your drawings, I realized some things are worth protecting even more than money. Lily wrapped her arms around her. Thank you. Denise smiled.
No.
Thank you for reminding all of us why integrity matters. Today, that first ruined sketchbook still sits on a shelf in my pottery studio. I never threw it away. The pages are still stuck together. The ink is still dry and black. Some people ask why I keep it. Because it reminds me of something important. People can destroy possessions. They can damage memories. They can even betray the people who love them most. But they cannot destroy character unless we let them. Lily still draws every single day. She still talks to her father while sketching. She still believes beautiful things are worth creating. And every time I watch her open a fresh sketchbook, I remember something Marcus used to tell her. Talent isn't something you're born with. It's something you protect. He was right. Not because talent needs protection from failure, but because sometimes it needs protection from the people who should have loved it the most. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe for more stories about family, resilience, and justice. And remember, the strongest people aren't the ones who never get hurt. They're the ones who keep creating after someone tries to break them.